Hey everyone, how's it going? This will be my final installment on the Newspaper3k library and how it makes scraping massive amounts of article data so easy. So what we're going to do is analyze article data, scraping the data with Newspaper3k, doing some text sentiment analysis with TextBlob, and then we will plot some data with the help of Seaborn. So in my last 2 minutes, my last two videos, we scraped only small data sets, but this time we're going to start working with some larger data sets and actually do some real text analysis. So we will find articles about President Joe Biden from three news outlets: ABC News, Fox News, and CNN, over a time period of a year from September 2020 to August of 2021. Collect these articles over monthly periods, have Newspaper3k and TextBlob scrape and do sentiment analysis for us, and then once all that data is stored, we'll of course use Seaborn, like I said before, to make us some pretty plots and graphs and see if maybe we can come to some basic conclusions. Now, if you don't know anything about Newspaper3k, TextBlob, sentiment analysis, even Rss Feed Scraping, which I do here as well, then I have two articles and videos here on Finxter.com. You can check them out if you would like to learn more. As well, if you want to learn more about pandas, which we're going to use, and how to plot data, there is a massive amount of content on Finxter.com. So check that out as well. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you have basic knowledge of what I'm presenting. Although, to be honest with you, the code is quite easy, not too difficult to understand. So even if you don't want to check those articles out, you'll be just fine. Now, before we begin, I just want to give a quick note about why I am going to use Google RSS. Now, from my experience finding and scraping older articles, it can be a hassle sometimes. However, we can use Google News RSS to help us and do the heavy lifting, so to speak, for us. So if we actually exit out of here and go to the Google News site itself, and I'll just show you an example here. We can do a search for Joe Biden. I'll just click this actually. Okay, that took a little longer than I expected. Let's try this again. Do a search for Joe Biden. And I'm going to input a news website. I will make it ABC News. And then let's give it some start and end dates. So let's say we want to search for articles from September of last year. So I am going to put in after 2020 September 1st and before the last day of September, of course. So let's type in that day. I believe it's the 30th. So we're going to search for articles between the 1st of September from last year and the last day of September. And as you'll see here, we are going to get a whole bunch of articles from September. Even the dates are shown as we click down, or as we scroll down. But I guarantee you that these links that don't have the date shown will be from September as well. Now there's a little trick that we can use. We can put in between this section of code just a little snippet called the RSS. We put this RSS in and we get ourselves an RSS feed of the results. So instead of scraping the site itself, you can scrape the feed instead. And if any of you know anything about web scraping, you'll know that Google sets a limit on the number of requests that you can make. However, these RSS feeds are actually an exception. You can scrape them as much as you want. The only drawback is that you only get 100 articles a maximum in the results. So depending on what you're looking for, you may need to adjust your search criteria if you know that you need more than what the results are going to give you. Also, you may want to check and make sure that the results are relevant to the topic and the dates that you have chosen. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this precise link here, which is just the same as the link above. We're going to take this whole link and we are going to put it in our code. And in this spot here, we're going to put our start dates, we're going to put our end dates, and then here is going to be the news site that we're going to need. Quick note, going back to the presentation here, all the code and the CSV file of the article data I have put up here on my GitHub. So if you want to just copy the code or download the CSV, just go to this website here, and I believe I have my code under the name of Biden Project, and my CSV is going to be combined.csv, as you'll see in the code above. So heading over now to our code, I will mention that this time, rather than do a code along, I'm just going to walk through the code. Besides setting the date parameters that we're going to need to pass into the Google URL, the first half of the code is just going to be a review of what I've done before. To be honest, it's really not going to be that different anyway from the code in the videos that I've done. And at the same time, I really don't want this video to be too long. I'm afraid that if I did a code along here, this video would probably take an hour. So I am set up here. I'm set up here on Jupyter notebooks within my virtual environment. You can code using whatever editor you wish. So the first thing we have to do, of course, is import all the necessary libraries here. If you find out in your imports that something ends up being missing, you can probably just do a pip install of any of these and you'll be just fine. As well, we are going to need to, download this little package called Punkt. It's part of NLTK. And what it will do is it will tokenize or parse the text down into its appropriate words and sentences in order for TextBlob to do its sentiment analysis properly. I do mention sentiment analysis. If you're not sure exactly what I mean by that, stay tuned. I will go over that just a little bit further down into the video as we go along. So now for the sentiment. So now let's show the code for the scraping and sentiment analysis. I decided to just put it all in a function. You don't have to. You can just code everything from the top down. It really does not matter. But in this function here, I'm going to pass the dates. And once the dates are passed in, I have the news sites set up in a list, and I have data as an empty list, which is going to be where we're going to store all of the article data, the sentiment scores or whatnot that we're going to return from the function and save into our CSV for subsequent analysis. But let's see here. So looping through each of these news outlets, we then loop through each of these dates. I will show you further below just how we're going to get these dates. So if you're wondering where these dates are coming from, I'll explain later. I've set an empty list of articles that we're going to store from each RSS from each RSS feed. And so as you see here, this is the broken up URL of the Google RSS feed. We're going to pass in after the start date, which is going to be the first day of every month, and then before here is going to be the end date of every month. And we're also going to pass in after site here the news site that we need to grab the articles from. Now after this section of the code, after this section of the code, of course, I'm going to show you as I said before, I'm going to show you how we set up dates. So getting back to the code, let's see here. So every article link. So excuse me. What we can do now is once we've pasted all of these variables into the Google RSS URL here, we are now going to scrape the RSS feeds and collect all of the article links from the feeds. So this is just standard RSS feed scraping protocol. As I said, I've done this before in my two previous videos. All of the links are going to be found in every item tag in the RSS. Very simple and easy to scrape. So now that we have our list of articles, we're going to loop through them and have Newspaper3k scrape the articles. We're going to store the title and we're going to store the text that's going to go into TextBlob. Then after that, we run our sentiment analysis in TextBlob now, which is here. And I put this in a quick if statement just in case we get some false hits, which could be a possibility. As I mentioned before, you may get some hits in your RSS feed that have absolutely nothing to do with Joe Biden. So I just threw a quick if statement in here just to make sure. You can even do this as well for the dates if you wish, but I noticed with these searches I had no issues at all. Every article was within the date range that I had searched for, so I didn't bother to include that in the code for this project. So we then get the polarity and the subjectivity scores using TextBlob with this set of code. I guess I'll mention it now briefly. Polarity. The polarity is just a judge of how negative. It judges how negative or positive the content is based on by the perceived positivity or negativity of each word in the text. Its polarity is a range from -1 to 1, -1 being completely negative, positive +1 being completely positive. Subjectivity on the other hand. Okay, good. Nothing happened. Subjectivity on the other hand is a score from 0 to 1. The higher the score, the more subjective, or the more, I guess you could say, emotionally charged an article is. While the closer the score is to 0, the more objective an article is naturally. I'll actually go into these, I'll go a little bit deeper into these scores the further down we go into the code and as we look at the charts. So once we get the polarity and subjectivity scores, I then throw in this quick if statement just in case the results or the article or the quote-unquote article happens to be a video or some sort of non-text content. This way we don't skew our data at all. Otherwise, if the data is good, we take the polarity and subjectivity scores and store that along with the site of our news outlet, the URL of the article, the title of the article, and the month of the article, which I put in the form of the year, the dash, and the month. And then I put the polarity and subjectivity in here. And then I'm going to save all of this data into one list, which is then going to be appended to our big list, which is going to be returned from the function. Now, if you've noticed, I put all this actually in a try and except block. Let me scroll up just a smidge here. So I threw all this in a try except block just in case we get a bad link, which in that case would kill our program. If the article function here cannot process the request because of the bad link, it's not reachable, it will return an article exception error. You'll see this article exception in the error output, and you would have to start over again. So and to be honest, you're almost guaranteed if you try to run this code that you will have a bad link or two. It's going to happen. So it's necessary, I believe, to put this in the try and accept block. So go ahead and do that, and make sure before you run the program, if you're going to put the article exception in, make sure that is imported up here as well. You have to do that in order to raise the exception. So with all of that done, all our data is then going to be passed out of the function. So now that's done and loop through, we return now the list is returned. We have to go and set our start and end dates. So I am using the date util library to get the time frames. Of course, for this project, you can actually just hand type the dates, the start and end dates in if you wish. There really aren't that many. It's only 12 apiece. But it can get tedious if you're looking to get a broader, a more deep, or an even longer, a longer range of dates. So we can just do a quick. So in case that's the case, we can just do a quick list comprehension using our rule here from the datetime library. And what this whole one line of code here will do is it will give us a list of dates using the format that we specify here at monthly intervals, starting from since we're looking for articles from September of last year to August of last year, we simply just set this dt start variable equal to the datetime for the datetime object of from September 1st of last year until August 1st. And with the intervals we put in, we then get a list of each first day of the month in the period we set. And these will be our list of start dates. For the end dates, it's a little more tricky because, as you know, each month does not have the same number of day, but we can alleviate this problem by just adding this little snippet of code here. And what it will do is it will check to see if the end of the month ends with 31. If there are 31 days in that month, it reduces it by 1, see if there's 30 days in the month, and so on and so forth until 28. So with this whole line of code now, we also have our end dates from the end of September to the end of August of this year. So now that we have our list of start and end dates, we now need to pair together the dates from the first element of both of these lists. The first element, the second element, third element, so on and so forth. And we can just do this by using the zip function to pair these dates together. And then what we have to do is throw this inside of the list function, which will turn the I believe it's an iterator. It will turn the iterator of tuples into a list of tuples that we then pass into get articles, and the data that we will return here is going to be stored as articles. Once that is finished, we then can write our data into a CSV. So we open a new CSV file. In this case, I'm just calling it combined. We need to write our headers or our column titles. In this case, it's going to be I'm going to write news source for the just the name of the news outlet to use, the URL of the article, the title of the article, the month in which the article was published, polarity, and then the subjectivity. Then we just write the header as the first row, and then just write each row of our data into the CSV and close it. And we are set to go. Now running this entire program here it's going to take several hours. So if you want to skip ahead and start plotting the data, as I said before, I do have a CSV on my GitHub, which is just right here. You can just go ahead and download this file. As well, this is the code to our project that we're doing today. So you can just go ahead, grab this file, and you can pull it out. So we can now go ahead and start plotting some data. So the first thing we need to do is we need to read the data into a pandas data frame, and we will do it as so using read CSV. Oh, excuse me. And then we have to convert the dates back into a datetime format in order to be able to sort the months appropriately, because the CSV is going to store stores everything as strings. So we need to convert these back to an actual datetime format. And I did kind of cheat a little bit using this format for my datetime so that this can be sorted easily. So if you want to make sure you get the same results as me and that the dates get sorted using the code that I'm using, make sure to use this time format as well. Otherwise your month column may be sorted incorrectly. Then after that, we need to sort the months using df.sortValues. And while it's not necessary, I just decided to sort the news source as well so that it returns in alphabetical order. I also put in place equals to true so that I don't have to set a different variable to this sorted data frame. The original data frame, which I set as df, will stay sorted throughout the rest of the code. So now we can use Seaborn and make some plots. And so first, I will show you a quick. Actually, let me show you Seaborn quickly. I'll show you the docs quickly. So, Seaborn is a Python data visualization library. It's based on Matplotlib, and it's a pretty good high-level interface that shows you very attractive plots. So let's go back to the code now. If you're interested in reading more, here's the URL of the Seaborn website. So going back to the code once again, we will first make a line chart of the average polarity per month for each news outlet. So with this SNS.set, by the way, the SNS here is this is the Seaborn as I'd imported it. So I'd import Seaborn as SNS. So if you're wondering what SNS is, it's just simply Seaborn. So I just set the figure size here to be I believe 15 on the x-axis, 17 units or 7 units high. You can set this as however you wish. It does not matter. And so to make the line plot, we use SNS.lineplot. What we're interested in this case is the monthly data for each news source. So we set x equal to month, y equal to polarity. Hue, I have set equal to news source. Hue is just it will draw a separate plot for each of the different values of news sources. Then I set the confidence interval equal to none. You'll see a highlight of confidence intervals on either side of the line. If we set CI equals to none, you don't see this. If we actually remove this, I'll show you what the graph will look like. It makes this graph look a little bit messy. Oh, that's right. I got to import all this stuff here. Give me a second. Let's go ahead and import this. I'm going to run this cell quickly. This may take a couple seconds. Okay, there we go. Now I need to read the data, and now you'll see what the graph will look like without the confidence interval shown. And as you can see, these highlights here make the data a little bit more difficult to read, so that's why I decided not to include the confidence interval. So let's go ahead and reset that. And I'll now show you the plot. So looking at this, we can maybe say, considering this is about Joe Biden, that the opinion may not be so favorable as it was at the time just after the elections, as seen by the general downward trend since the elections. The elections were in November, which would be here, and although he started office, he came into office in January, which is here. Nonetheless, there's a downward trend that you see from almost all the news sources. So we can also say that certainly the last month was definitely not a good one for the president, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise if you're an American, because we just recently had the disastrous pullout of soldiers from Afghanistan. The Taliban just took over, and the whole withdrawal was not conducted very well, and it angered much of the American public. And it seemed like it certainly had effect on the reporting as well from at least these three news sources. And it's certainly, if you do have an understanding of American news and politics, it shouldn't surprise you at all to see Fox News lean more negative than the other two articles, because Fox News usually supports the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party, which is the party of the president. On the other hand, we would expect CNN, which leans more politically to the left. They usually support the Democrat Party. It should not surprise us that their data will tend to be a bit more positive towards the president. And ABC News, while typically considered to be not too politically biased, has their values somewhat in between here on average. So exploring further, we can draw a line plot of the subjectivity as well. So we just write the same code. All we change here is the y value to subjectivity. And as you can see, there really isn't too much to be said other than ABC, as shown by the blue line here, will tend to be a bit more objective than the other two news sources, CNN and FoxNews.com. So scrolling down a bit, let's see. Also, yeah, that's right. So also, if you wish, we can represent this data as box plots instead of line plots. All you have to do is just simply replace sns.lineplot with sns.barplot. So here I have a bar plot of the polarity data from every news source for each month. Really, at least from this, doesn't show us too much that's different. We also can, in case you're interested, if you're interested in looking at data, let's say from last year as well, what we can do is set a new data frame to the subset of data that includes the months less than January of 2021. So you just simply type in df, take the month column, and get everything that's less than January of last year. Set this into a new data frame. In this case, I called it in 2020. And then if you want to make a bar plot from just that, from those 4 months of last year, you just set SNS bar plot with the same general data here. The only thing you have to change is the data. I left the confidence interval out just so you can see the line, just so you can see what it would look like if I left the confidence interval. If I included the confidence interval. If the confidence interval is set to none, your data would simply just be a bunch of bars without any lines showing at all. So let's see. So here's a bar chart. Here's a bar chart of the average subjectivity per month from each source. Here it really adds nothing to what we know so far. If you would like to put the legend in a different location, you can simply just type in plt.legend and then put in whatever location you wish it to be. So continuing further, Okay, so this is a pretty good plot actually. This is a histogram of all the subjectivity values for the entire past year from each news outlet. So in general, this range from 0.2 to 0.6, it's what you usually see no matter what news outlet you're trying to study. It doesn't have to be just from these three. And that even includes news sites that tend to be a bit more politically extreme. So if you think about it, it seems like it's a fair representation, considering that you can't really be completely subjective or completely subjective or completely objective. It's natural that there's going to be some words that will make it seem subjective. So this seems to be a good this is the usual range that you're going to see your values from. So let's see, what was I going to say? Yeah, so if we go back very quickly, I'll show you the subjectivity plot. So as you see here, maybe you noticed before on the y-axis, the values really there wasn't much. It didn't seem like there was much of a difference in values here, but with the knowledge that we now know, the subjectivity usually being within a very narrow range, the difference that we see could actually have some meaning, especially if you're looking to do some comparisons. So moving on further. Oh yes, that's right. I should probably yeah, that's right. I forgot to explain the code a little bit. So to make a histogram plot, you just type in sns.histplot, put in your data, and in this case, since we're studying the subjectivity, we put that in as the x value, set our hue equal to news source, KDE meaning kernel density estimate, I believe. Yes, kernel density estimate. We set that to true, so that we see these smoothing distribution lines, and instead of just seeing bars all across our data, we actually have lines too. So and I decided to add a color palette here, just to make the data maybe a bit more colorful, and hopefully you'll be able to notice these lines a little bit better. So for this line here, this is ABC. This is for CNN and Fox News, is this line here in the purple. I guess what we can notice is that since ABC tends to have a reputation for being fairly balanced, I think the data could reflect that. The curve here for ABC is thinner, and its peak, which is above the rest, is also a bit more to the left, meaning more objective than the other two news sources. This could be same for many other news sources as well. We'd have to do some further analysis and research. Fox, on the other hand, has a wider curve, peaking further to the right and lower as well, meaning in general it seems to be more subjective towards the president, which probably is not going to be much of a surprise, while CNN, on the other hand, seems to be completely in the middle, not just of subjectivity, but the height of their peaks as well. Let's see. So it's a little difficult to analyze the differences. Wait. Okay. So moving on. So let's see some more graphs before we finish here. So this is simply a box plot of the same data as in the histogram that we looked. It's not very easy. You'd have to eyeball it really closely to be able to notice the differences. You can kind of notice a little bit, but it's not really much to see here. So if we wanted to do a box, so these box plots here, we just do sns.boxplot, set our x value. In this case, I've set the x value equal to news source, y is equal to subjectivity, since that's what we're studying. And you can change the width of these box plots as well just by setting the value here. I believe it's from 0 to 1. And I just decided to group all of the articles from each news source, regardless of month, into one plot here. Let's see. So moving on further, this is a box plot of the polarity. This is just the same as the subjectivity plot above, but this is just for the polarity for the whole year from each source. Unfortunately, these two outliers here and here make the data maybe a little bit tougher to visualize. It would compact the graph a little bit, but as you can see in the code, yeah, that's right. As you can see in the code here, there's no need to set a hue. That's one of the differences here with box plot. Moving down further. So here we're analyzing the overall polarity from all the news sources together over every month. In this case, we simply just replace the X value from news sources to month. And in this case, it doesn't. In this case, it doesn't seem the data here doesn't seem to reflect too much, except for maybe the last month here is the only noticeable difference. But otherwise, there's not too much here that this really shows us. I simply just wanted to demonstrate a different sort of plot for you. So moving on. You can also do monthly box plots, setting the hue to the news source, and you can do side-by-side distribution comparisons for every month. As you see here, this data is a little bit difficult to see. You can certainly break it down, and you can certainly break it down into some monthly intervals if you want to see the data a little bit more clearly. But it confirms what we noticed in the very first graph up above here, the polarity line chart. It basically confirms what we've seen before, that there was certainly a downward trend, and that Fox in general seems to be a bit more negatively inclined towards the president. And it at least shows us that we can certainly stand to maybe look a little more deeply into the data if we want to find out anything more. Moving on further, this is simply just this is the same box plot as the polarity plot above here, except this is just for the subjectivity. Again, it doesn't really tell us too much. Moving on further, you can also analyze a news source by itself. So here I'm plotting just monthly data from ABC. We can extract the data by simply type in df.groupby. And in this case, since we want to get the news source, we just group by the news source, and then we just get the group abcnews.com, set that to a new variable, and then we set this new data frame as our data into this box plot that we wish to study. And in this case, I decided to use a different palette just to, I don't know, just for fun. We can also, moving on further, we can also do histograms of each source alone, like here. And if we move a little bit further, so this is the same plot as the histogram above. As the histogram, not this one, but the overall subjectivity histogram, this one, except this is just for the polarity. And so going back down here, so it doesn't tell us, so to be honest, I should probably show the code here. Yeah, it should be okay. Yeah, this works. Come on. Okay, so I mean, this data doesn't really tell us too much that we don't know already. But if you're curious, in general, this graph, just like with the subjectivity, is fairly indicative of what you will normally see from normally what you'll see from any website. You'll see the polarity values. The range is going to be somewhat between. It's going to fall mostly between negative 0.2 and about 0.3. Even politically extreme websites, they're not going to fall. Very, very few of their articles are going to fall outside of this range in general. In case you're curious to find out just what the general polarity values are in general for news articles. I also put here in the comments. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I already mentioned the KDE here. So I also put here in the comments another way you could possibly plot the data. So let's say you wanted to give these lines here a different color. You can simply you can do the same thing as we did for the ABC plots, get each group separately, and then you can do a separate plot here, set the color to whatever you wish, put all these plots in one cell, and then run the cell together, and you would get something similar to this. And in this case, I decided to use a different palette. So I promise you here. Oh, that's right. Excuse me. So we can also analyze data for a single month alone. So let's say you want to find out more about the news and article, or let's say you want to find out more about the news in August. So we can first extract the data for the month in the same fashion that we do for the news source. So we just do group by month, and then we just get the group, and in this case we want August. We're going to type in 2021-08, set this new data frame to a variable, and then we're going to pass this into whatever plot we use. In this case, I decided to use a KDE plot just to demonstrate a different kind of plot you can use. This KDE plot is almost the same as these histograms. You just take the bars out, you get the lines. And in this case, I set shade equals to true, so that the area underneath the graph is shaded, just so you see what it's like. But again, looking at if we want to, let's say we want to get something out of this graph here, it really doesn't tell us too much that's new. We already knew in general that the polarity in the month of August, the articles tended to stray a bit more towards the negative than usual, and it certainly does reflect this. So I promise you, just about done here. So moving on to the last few plots. Okay, so this is just a hist plot of this is a histogram of the same plot as this one above. So instead of a KDE plot, I just did sns.histplot. Moving on. So this is just the ABC subjectivity data represented as box plots. I guess you can say here that that ABC is at least quite consistent in their reporting of President Biden. I guess maybe it'd be interesting to check out if this is the same for all their news in general. So moving on to the last couple of plots here. Let's see. Okay, so these are the same plots as ABC, or I should say similar plots to ABC, but instead this is just for Fox News alone, studying the subjectivity. And as you can see, compared to ABC, the confidence intervals, the variance here is a little bit wider, a little bit more varied, a little more up and down. But as I said before, nothing new that we don't know already. And this is, of course, the same for the polarity. So we do an sns.boxplot, set x equals to month, y equal to polarity. And in this case, I set my data equal to Fox, which is the new data frame that I had set after isolating all the data from Fox News using group by, then get group. And finally, this is our last plot here. If you want to analyze disparate groups that aren't exactly in order, or you want to just isolate, say, like in this instance, two of the news sources, and you want to study them side by side, what you can do is you can take each group separately, like here, isolate each group, set it as a data, set each isolated group as its own separate data frame, and then we can set we can concatenate these data frames using pd.concat, pass in the data frames that you want to concatenate as a list. It doesn't just have to be 2, it can be 3, 4, 5, 6, as many as you wish. And then with this new concatenated data frame, we can then pass this in as data into our new box plot as set here. And as you can see in the data, you can see more clearly the difference in the reporting, at least concerning the polarity, the negativity, positivity, whatnot, between Fox News, which is in brown, and ABC News, which is in blue. So this is my last graph, and this also concludes my series on the Newspaper3k library and how incredibly useful it is to scrape massive amounts of text data, and you only need a couple of lines to do it. And you can also see just what we're really capable of potentially accomplishing with only those couple lines of data. As well, you also got a little introduction to making plots with Seaborn. So I hope you enjoyed this series, and if you did like these videos, or you like the content in general from Finxter.com, either on the website or here on YouTube, go ahead, do yourself a favor, and hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys, and we will see you later. Thank you.